Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Coach and Benway podcast. This is the Weekly Bile, where we talk about the week's news and how it has affected us or not affected us or made us smirk or made us just roll our eyes in disgust at the idiocy of clown world that we're living in. I'm Coach Red Pill, joined as always by Dr. Benway, and Dr. Benway is going to lead off with the first topic, which is to impeach or not to impeach. That is the question.
Well, before I get into it, I just want to make it known that I was on vacation this week, and I frankly enjoyed my time, not just away from work, but away from the news media. I did not pay attention to it. I was in a very scholastic mood, reading all various books and films I wanted to watch. And I blame you, the viewers, for having me go back over the week to read up on all of this shit that I had wonderfully avoided, only to realize that, yes, there is a society that I want to avoid. So thank you for that.
Yes, it's all your fault, dear audience members. We hate you for forcing us to watch the news.
Exactly, your fault. Do penance. For this.
That's our approach.
So impeach or not to impeach. So this is an interesting question. So as people may be well aware, the wonderful dear leader Nancy Pelosi, in her grandness, has been fighting tendencies in her party naturally to stay in power. The likes of the Ocasio-Cortezes, Bernie Sanders doesn't really account. He's in the Senate. But that tendency versus the more moderate tendency, all are competing to say what they should be focusing on. And Pelosi is now in a rock and a hard place a little bit to decide whether to basically keep the door open and push very hard on the necessary conditions to impeach the president, if not leading with that, or avoiding that issue, doing the meat and potatoes stuff that got them elected in the swing districts, mainly like we're going to just be better service to deliver the things that your local constituencies need, and try to work her way through those tendencies. Basically, I don't know that she is going to have an easy go at that. I think there's too many people on the far left chomping at the bit over it. I think there's too many people in the center weary of that and worried about costing their ass in 2 years. So I think she's just going to be on this horrifically uncomfortable tightrope, and it's going to be frankly fun to watch. And it's going to be proof yet again that the worst thing to be in the House of Representatives is the majority party.
Yeah, because, the issue of to impeach or not to impeach. If they impeach Trump, they got the votes probably to impeach him. And so what? It's going to die in the Senate, a very quick and nasty death, right? And so it dies in the Senate, and who's going to have egg all over their face? The Democrats. And everybody's going to be saying, well, look at the fucking Democrats in Congress. They don't accomplish shit. They just try to, go after Orange Man bad, right? Instead of doing the job of the people. And of course, the leftists are never going to be satisfied. People that are embodied by people like Ocasio-Cortez and that whole ilk. They're never going to be satisfied. So Pelosi has to, what I would suggest she do, as a disinterested observer, is to, just punch a hippie and just fucking ignore the hard left, the crazy left, and just move on with the business of governing. If she goes down the rabbit hole of impeachment, it's going to be like Newt Gingrich, basically. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, the condition. This is the standard politics 101, which is the far side of a wide-ranging party invariably gets marginalized because you realize, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Right. Every attempt that a party like that has tried to kind of move the center, or if you will, recharge and break off into a new kind of political party or tendency, doesn't work as well as they think. They tend to still vote with the Democratic majority. Sometimes, you get a guy like Trump who fucks things up with a wrench, but that's not really in Congress, is it? Use the Tea Party as another example.
Yeah,
they won, didn't do shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So keep that in mind. What is interesting though is that she is leading, or at least as far as I can tell, with, amongst other things, major infrastructural spending. Now, of course, it is smart, but I'll tell you who could be smarter. If he played his cards right, which is the president. And I would just simply do this. I would look at everything they'd want to spend on infrastructure and know damn well that was part of my campaign promise to offer similar things. And I'll say, tell you what, I'll grant you everything you want. Maybe I'll throw in a little bit more stuff, but you have to pass the border wall. There is no, if, ands, or buts around that. And if they say no, I can just turn around and say, well, not only did they not pass the infrastructure they wanted, their petulance over it was based primarily against me trying to keep you safe. So now what pettiness is that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he could own them on that,
Yeah,
and I would push for that.
Yeah, I agree. Just a side note, Ocasio-Cortez, isn't she lovely? Isn't she just beautiful? And the fact that she has shown us and taught us all that there are only 3 chambers in government: the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives.
Once we control the 3 chambers, what is branches of government? Oh yeah, she's like, oh yeah, the branches, and it's the the House, the Senate, the president, and it's like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But to me, this is actually an important issue because I actually think it speaks to a deterioration in the society, which was, I remember, I may be the last generation to get this. I was taught something like civics.
Yeah.
And so not only was I taught how the government works, how it functions, how a bill actually becomes law, all that stupid easy shit that you should know.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did I get it at the federal level, I actually got it at the state level. I got my own state's constitution, Illinois, and how all of that bullshit worked. That's even more convoluted, but it doesn't matter. I was still taught it. When you don't teach children that, when you don't have any expectations as to the basics of the government, not only how it works, but how they decided to make it work this way and why it actually, things like gridlock are not necessarily a problem, but the sign of the success of the system. You then get idiotic statements like Ocasio-Cortez's, and, she can be is clearly as dumb as ditch water with regard to how the government works. And yet she's just as acceptable a leader as anyone else because no one cares about the system or how it works. They only care about the accumulation of power and who yells the loudest. You get the leaders that you deserve, frankly. And if this is the type of education that it produces, this dunce is your representative, then so be it. That's who you deserve.
Yeah, I found it just so hilarious because look, here's the issue. In this particular interview, it's not that she had a brain fart. We all have brain farts. I've had them on this show plenty of times, and dear listeners know that, and you, Benway, know that, and so fine. That's not the issue. It's just it was symptomatic of her just basic ignorance and stupidity. Okay, and the thing is, she is the one of the hard lefters who are pushing Pelosi. Shit, before she'd even been sworn in as a congresswoman, she was leading a protest in the fucking Congress at Capitol Hill to get rid of Pelosi as the leader of the Democrats. I mean, what the fuck, right? This woman is just going to be, for the Republicans, she's the gift that's going to keep on giving. She's just this piñata of stupidity that, you just have to not even hit her, just like poke her a little bit. And candy is going to fall out. It's just going to be wonderful. So, yeah, there was that. I just wanted to note on that. And regarding your issue on the border, okay, the border wall that you were talking about, the quid pro quo between Trump and Pelosi, that Trump could own the Dems by doing that quid pro quo, which would be the smart thing. Well, see, that caravan that's coming up from Guatemala or Honduras or whatever shithole countries that it was coming up from, right? Now, the Mexicans are protesting them. The Mexicans don't want these people in their country, and that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's sort of like an unexpected twist to this whole thing.
Long story short, the mayor of Tijuana, I forget the man's name. I've been reading reports that he's very concerned about this caravan, and I had saw in passing. Forgive me if these numbers are not accurate. They were an estimate to begin with anyway. I think there's something on the order of like 500 people in that caravan who he's concerned are criminals of some stripe, and is naturally. Tijuana is not in a great place to start with criminality wise to begin with, but to have 500 more from people outside of Mexico who doesn't know who the fuck they are, what they're doing, but if he's concerned about that, I think that's a real legitimate concern. And remember, not too long ago, they were saying there may be a criminal or two, but they're just kids with stuffed animals, very tired from all the walking that they've done. Let's put it this way: Mexico has no interest in being nice to America, right? So if they're worried, it's for legitimate reasons.
Yeah. What's interesting about the story is that, first of all, the fact that they're crossing all of Mexico to get to America and they're refugees, what the fuck? Why don't they just find refuge in southern Mexico? Why do they have to cross all of Mexico? And the other thing is, of course, that they're saying that when they get to the border, they're just going to attack it, just like rampage it. They're going to just try to breach the border by force. Okay, what kind of optics is that going to look like? And if the Democrats, because see, everybody's saying that this is a potential trap for Trump, which is true in some ways. Dick Morris did a really good analysis about this. He basically said that with the courts basically twisting Trump's arm and not allowing him to do his duty as the executive, yeah, sure, eventually the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. But it'll take 2-3 years for that ruling to come down, right? Just as he did with the so-called Muslim ban, which wasn't a Muslim travel ban. It was just a ban of certain countries, and it was perfectly legitimate as the executive to do so. But these liberal activist judges decided, for political reasons, that they wanted to twist Trump's arm and create this window of 2-3 years. So they're going to try to do this, or they are doing this with Trump, right? But it's a trap for Trump, but it will be a trap for the Democrats, because if all of a sudden on the news there are these images of this horde of migrants trying to forcibly break through the border, it's going to play right into Trump's hands. I mean, he's going to be saying, "Look, we need a wall. Give me the money." And what's the Democrats going to do? I mean, it seems that this migrant situation, this migrant caravan, it's one of those political situations where you really don't know who's going to win until the facts actually break out on the ground. It's just going to be one of those weird, like Ali Frazier kind of fights where you don't know who's gonna wind up on top, because they're equally matched and the stakes are equally high for both sides. So that's going to be fucking interesting.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. I know exactly what the left wing wants on this front, and what they want is very clear to me. They want the equivalent of that dead migrant child on the beach of Europe.
Sure.
They want, I'll tell you what they really want. They want an ICE agent or a military agent of some kind to have put a bullet in the head of a kid. And then that image will be all over the world. You'll have the CNN commentators crying and ripping their hair out saying, "What country do we live in? I don't recognize it, blah, 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 blah." All that jazz. So they want that child dead. Trust me. I know how leftists think. They want that child dead.
Yeah.
And that's how they're going to fucking get everything they want. Trust me, which is why the president does have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Now, I know people on our side will say, "Oh, don't cuck, do whatever you want." Fair, all well and good, but you try living against that image for the rest of your days and seeing how long you can withstand it.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No.
So
it's not
be
easy.
very careful.
It's a very, very, it's not merely contentious issue. It's a fucking radioactive issue. This could really torpedo Trump's presidency. Yeah. But the funny thing is that if he allows the border people to be overwhelmed, and says, the first thing, well, it's because the Democrats and the Democratic justices and all the rest of it, and we'll get into the whole tussle with Roberts in just a second, but it's these Democratic judges that made this happen, and the Democratic Party, and blames it all on the Democrats. If the people go in that direction, it could really hurt the Democrats in a way that they can't recover from, because they're going to be saying, well, these fuckers, they basically want our country to be overrun by fucking criminals. So
the one thing I'll be cautious on that front is I worry that the president's played that card a little bit too much the past 2 years. There've been a little bit too many times where he said, "Oh, everything would be great if people just backed my bills." They're never going to fucking back your bills. You know how they act. So don't come. You can't play, the crying of the wolf. It's like, "Oh, everything would be great if the Democrats just played the game." He's going to have to be a little bit sterner. So he is kind of stuck in a tough place where, yes, you are going to try to avoid the pitfalls of, like I said, putting a bullet through a 5-year-old kid's head. But you also don't want to necessarily be in a position where, the whole fucking caravan is crossed through and you said, "Oh, tough luck, those fucking Democrats. Oh, well, vote for me next time." So it's going to be a really tough balance. The clearest response, naturally, at this point is that he just has to get the wall built by hook or by crook. And frankly, I don't think he needs any legal approval to do it. And I would even suggest, in the world where the Ocasio-Cortezes can get around playing her game without worrying about the structures of government and just whine long enough to where, you get what you want, a la like the Brett Kavanaugh hearing, just, destroy a man's reputation until he goes away kind of thing. Mm-hmm. In a world like that, I would just use force. The courts be damned, frankly. And I would just, and if I was really going to get cute, I would just go around and say the interpretation of judicial review is spurious to begin with, and just do whatever the fuck I wanted. But that's just being cutesy pootsy at a certain point. But he is going to have to do something like that. I would suggest he is going to have to fight, regardless of what the courts think, and let the courts decide how it's going to play out, and he can just ignore the injunctions put against him.
What exactly happened with Roberts? I'm like surprised that there was a tip between the two.
I'm gonna probably over summarize it to the point of missing a lot of the key nuance here, but essentially, Trump was complaining in response to some of the court situations in the 9th district that, look, they always vote to wrap my knuckles above and beyond what the legal precedent warrants, and it's bullshit. They're actually partisan. And Roberts basically responded in a way that I frankly, to be fair to him, is probably the only way he could have responded, which was to say, look, I believe that the courts operate effectively in a fair and balanced kind of way, because frankly, that is the imperative of the Supreme Court leadership, which is to be above partisan politics.
Yeah.
You know, they have been trained, like, that's why they don't stand up or smile or clap at any of the speeches of like the State of the Union address, whatnot. Now, of course, they fuck around with that. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg says whatever the fuck she thinks, because she's an old woman and about to die soon. So that's their prerogative once they get to that age. But by and large, they're supposed to not say that. So this, I think, was his way of avoiding the issue. And I'm probably willing to bet he said it in this tone, which is, well, you know, the courts, I believe in the objectivity of the courts, and they try to do their best. I think that was his way of just saying, I'm not going to give you my full opinion on this. I'm just going to do the standard thing. And then Trump fired back and said, no, they are full of shit, and you know it. And he gave all the examples for it. I think Trump is fundamentally right, but I also think I know why Roberts did what he did, because he can't really say otherwise.
Yeah, he has to.
My critique of the situation, 2020 hindsight, is that Roberts should have just said nothing.
Well, no, I mean, Trump shouldn't have goaded the guy, because the guy gave like the standard milquetoast reply that any Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, as putatively the head of the judiciary, right? He had to give that kind of milquetoast response. So, no, I think it was Trump who said, just, come on. But unless he wanted some sort of effect out of this situation with Roberts.
I think Trump said what he normally would have said. If I were Roberts, I would have just simply said, as the head of the court system, I do not opine in any political matters that the president may have, and I would lend it at that.
Yeah, okay, well, fair enough. But I'm unclear as to why Trump decided that this was a hill worth dying on. I mean, or not dying on, but rather, why get into a fight with this guy?
I think because Trump took it as a slight for whatever reason. I mean, fair enough. I mean, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court did contradict the president to a certain extent on that. The president knows that people just pull that quote out of Roberts and say, see, the Supreme Court doesn't agree with you. The Democrats are right. Vote for us, kind of thing. So he does what he normally does and fight back on that. I don't necessarily begrudge the president on that, but I also just just the clearness of hindsight, someone emotionally removed from it at this point in time, I just think that Roberts's response was at trying to be out of, I'm staying out of it as much as possible and just giving broad cover to the court system as such. Is it a hill worth dying on? Who knows? And to a certain extent, who cares? I think the president knows that it works with a group of people that he wants it to work with. Whether or not it works with the broader populace, probably not. But at the same time, it's not going to cost him anything, I don't think.
Well, I think that Trump has better be careful, because I think that he's starting to lose his core. The core diehards are kind of starting to get disillusioned, and it's this fucking wall issue that I myself find sort of.
Well, yeah,
trivial.
I mean, I think they are getting diluted, but I don't think it's, or not diluted, excuse me, disillusioned.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's because he got into a fight with Roberts. I think it's because he's not building the wall.
Yeah. No. I just wanted to segue to that particular issue, that Trump should pay attention, because there is. The word is that he berated his Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who used to be a Goldman Sachs guy, because the stock market is sort of like, not doing that great. The markets are sort of like, it's down 6% for the year, Yeah, shrug is basically my notion of that. I think it's sort of like expected because Powell is winding back QE, and so that kind of and he's also upping interest rates. So that's sort of inevitable that the he's gently taking away the Kool-Aid from the party. Or not the Kool-Aid, the punch bowl, but it it's might as well been Kool-Aid, right? But anyway, he's taking away the punch bowl from the party, and so, yeah, there's been a slowdown, 6%, of the New York Stock Exchange. I haven't looked at NASDAQ, but because I really don't follow the market.
It's not been great. I have unfortunately been looking at my portfolio.
Oh, how bad has NASDAQ been? Well, we can look
Sorry,
it up.
you were saying?
No, I was saying how bad was NASDAQ year to date? Do you happen to know?
I don't know overhand, but it's down. But regardless of this, to me, that the big issue here is, and this actually is going to go to a hard right critique of Trump. I know there's always the crowd who just says the MAGA quote, and they think that's all a political position requires, and I'm frankly embarrassed that I have to keep addressing them. But here's the reality of the situation. The only reason Trump was touting, oh, look, under me, the market's been great, it was a stupid move to keep on saying, like, that's your big sign of your success, because we all know that the markets always will go down, especially when people outside of your immediate control, like you said, with quantitative easing and whatnot, can influence it.
Yep.
It will look bad on the president. So if I'm responsible for it going up, am I not responsible for it going down? You get into that trap. And the problem with that is, I know that the market's uptick this past few years was in part stimulated by those tax tactics, the tax reduction. Here's the thing. Those tax reductions were the corporatist GOP, middle way point that he said, we'll get a victory on this before we get anything else. Those tax cuts represent to a lot of the harder people who wanted tighter control on immigration, who wanted the wall, who wanted better control of the Obamacare fiasco. All of that stuff has not yet happened. In other words, the stuff to address the middle class, the working class. So the dealing with the opioid crisis, the dealing with immigration, the HB1 visas, all of that's not done. But hey, guys, you got a tax cut and the market is up or down. Oh, now the market's down. Well, fuck you, Steve Mnuchin. Like, well, you shouldn't have to just rest your laurels on this one thing that has a lot of influences above and beyond you. You should be able to say, look at that fucking wall I built. Yeah. Look at all of these. Look at that Obamacare bullshit that's done with. Look at the fact that half of you aren't dying now that you would have been dying because of this fucking drug crisis, or dealing with China. He's still in a fight with China, and I'm certainly happier that he's at least pushing on that front. But frankly, there's a lot of big stuff that is off the table, and I'm sorry if Ann Coulter keeps reminding him of this all the time. You cannot just simply say, oh, it's just the never Trumpers who are critical of him. That's just a fucking lie.
Yeah.
And you know it. And I know the commentators who are going to be on the bottom of this video bitching about it. But I'm sorry, you have to be adults and hold your leader's feet to the fire if he's not fulfilling his promises.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, too many big issues are being left unaddressed by this president, and he better fucking do something about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So moving on from there, we mentioned China and this kerfuffle between the U.S. and China and trade and all that. I don't know the details. Probably the only people who really probably know are actually the negotiators, because at this point in time, who knows what's going on. But the one thing I do know about that whole situation with China is, number one, China is never going to pick up its chips and leave the table. They can't. The United States is its biggest customer. They need its biggest customer. So one way or another, some sort of deal is gonna happen, and it's gonna be kicking or screaming on the part of the Chinese, but it's gonna happen. They cannot walk away from the American market, and this is the problem, of course, about deficits, trade deficits that nobody ever seems to understand, and like that the British, for instance, don't seem to understand. When you are the debtor nation, when there's a trade imbalance, it's the debtor who has all the power in the relationship, because he can ultimately default or hurt the other guy. In the case of the U.S.-China situation, China is the one that's going to hurt more than the United States in any kind of final war, because the United States is the debtor nation. in the EU Brexit situation, Britain has all the cards because they're the net debtor country. And that's the thing that well, at least the Americans seem to know that, at least Trump, because of his own personal bankruptcies and whatnot. He probably understands this better than fucking Theresa May does, that's for sure. But going on to the China situation, you wanted to talk about the response of the Chinese to the Muslims. Please tell us.
Yeah, I have it. Unfortunately, I don't have too many sources that I was, can go back on and reference, but essentially, I have been seeing a lot more rumblings of how China has been dealing with the minority situation in their own country. I mean, they have a number of minorities that they're worried about, but one of the more recent ones that they're getting press over is their treatment of Muslims. And in particular, I forget what regions they're in. They're probably in the western areas of the country. I can't say that for certain.
The Uyghurs and all the rest of it, yeah.
Yeah, probably. But in order to deal with potential Muslim revolts or religious-based problems, which, trust me, China has a lot of internal revolts that they never like to talk about because it's a fucking problem, and it's not just with Muslims, and it's not just with Tibetans, it's with their own poor. Yeah. They decided to take a page out of the Maoist playbook and decided to imprison a number of Muslims and re-educate them. And you'd say, well, how did they re-educate Muslims? Well, they'll force them to have alcohol and eat pork.
This is fucking funny.
And to enjoy it. It really is out of the Maoist playbook of the re-education camp. So for those of you who don't know of the Cultural Revolution and also the Great Leap Forward, pretty much after Mao's land reform / agrarian economic reforms resulted in famine and disaster, he decided to stave off revolt against his leadership by having the Cultural Revolution, which is basically revolt against the elders who are not trustworthy and they're kind of complicit in capitulation to capitalism. Love me, I'm the dear leader. And so what happened was kids would rat out their parents, take them to these re-education camps, and make them confess their crimes and acquiesce to the regime.
Yeah, basically torture them in order to get their
psychological and physical torture. It was a sick kind of fucking thing that they did, but this is essentially what the Chinese are doing now. And what's interesting about this, and this is something I have an ambiguous feeling towards, which is I notice a lot of people on our side are like, well, at least the Chinese know how to deal with their Muslims.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, yeah, they're dealing with it. Can't blame them for that. On the other hand, I know exactly the mindset it comes from. It's the worst of the history of China. It's that bureaucratic, mentality combined with just brutish ruthlessness to where, yes, I get that we want to say we have to deal with our Muslims in the West. I get it. When I look at the Chinese, I'm like, if I have to become China to deal with the Muslims, I'll shoot myself in the head. I don't want either the Muslims or to be the Chinese Confucius world. It's just anathema to Western civilization.
No, that notion of forcibly turning the Muslims like that and forcing them to eat pork and drink. Yeah, I earlier before we started the show, I made a joke about it that basically the Chinese are forcing the Muslims to have a frat barbecue. Yeah. But no, joking aside, see, you can't have a society where you're forcing people to rescind their religion, at the point of a bayonet. That's just, you can't have that kind of society. But here's something that's interesting about the Chinese is that, to me, they're the social, what do they call that thing? The social index that they are creating for people. And
I forget the name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a social index where basically you have a score for your social interaction. And your friends, if your friends get negative scores, you get negative scores. Okay? So it's sort of like it makes you pressure your friends to comply with the government, right? And people in the West are starting to say, hey, that seems like a pretty good idea. I mean, they're not saying it openly because we're all like, oh, that's awful, blah, blah, blah. But the tech companies, the FANGs, you can tell that they're kind of thinking about it. You can tell that they're thinking, man, this would be a fucking good idea now, wouldn't it? This would solve all our problems now, wouldn't it? Because I've been thinking about online. I just want to go in a certain direction here on this online issue. Because I've been thinking a lot about the online world and what we say online and the stupidity that we say and all the rest of it. And I've come to the following conclusion that I hadn't really realized before. But so much of our online comments and all the rest of it, it seemed to me, are not just a way of letting off steam, but also a way of experimenting. We can say things online from behind the shield of anonymity, where we can just say any old nonsense, and we can just let it sit there and see the reaction of other people and say, well, is this reasonable or just crazy? Am I the crazy one, or is everybody else crazy? You see what I'm saying? And I think it's a very useful tool, because like in our day-to-day lives, for instance, we can't like entertain certain wild notions publicly because we don't really know if anybody would accept them or not. But like online, you can entertain all kinds of crazy ideas that you had never any intention of actually fulfilling or actually doing, and all the rest of it. It's just sort of like a thought experiment. And so if that is taken away from you, I think that it causes an explosion later on. It's when you leave the pressure cooker on and you don't leave the valve open. You know what I'm saying? And yes. I think that the Chinese, with this thing that they're doing, they're just cruising for a bruising. They're just the explosion will be much, much worse because everybody will be sick of it. Yeah.
I fundamentally agree. And this is why I think there's this false delusion on our side of thinking that there's something great about China. Let me tell you the truth about China.
Who says that?
China is merely the end state of what the trend that the Western democratic countries and the tech oligarchs are trending towards. Mm-hmm. That is the kind of authoritarian society that they prefer to have, the whole social control of everything. We see it coming. China is just, where we're going to be in 20 to 30 years if things keep going unimpeded the way we're at. And to your point, yes, the escape valve is one of the fundamental things necessary to keeping the society under control.
Yeah.
Because if you don't keep it under control, one of two things happen. Either you just create a population of dead souls, which frankly, a lot of Chinese, I'll be very crude, are that. They're dead souls inside. Or you just brood endless resentment to the point where there will be a violent response to it.
Yeah.
Funny enough, like this whole notion of, people might say, oh, I like what they're doing with Muslims. No, you won't, because if you think that you're going to create this conversion of Muslims by torturing them, all you're going to do is create enough resentment and they become requisite Muslims. They become Muslims in private, becomes an even more important part of their identity, and then they will come and they will kill you.
Yeah.
As a result. The only way to deal with it, frankly, if this is such a big problem, is to expel them from your country. That's really the only, not just more humane thing to do, but the only more rational thing to do.
Yeah, it's a more humane thing to do. Yeah. No, I think that the Chinese, look, I think fundamentally the Chinese are going to, it's going to happen to the Chinese in the next few decades. What's happened to China always historically. China has this period of expansion where it interacts with the rest of the world and they're open to the world and all the rest of it. And they get to a point where they sort of like implode and decide, fuck the world, and they close off their borders and they isolate themselves and deliberately take steps backwards. You do know that, of course, the Chinese arrived in California long before Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, right? And the only reason that the Chinese did not colonize the Americas, which they could have, is because at that time some emperor, I forgot the details of it, some emperor decided, no, we're too much foreign contact, and he closed off the borders and he ordered all of the ships, all of the Chinese ships, to be burned. And they were. And that's what China does periodically. It just closes itself off from the rest of the world because it can. Because China has the ability to close itself off. It's big enough. It has enough people. And frankly, its political philosophy, its cultural philosophy is such that it cares so little for the individual that it doesn't mind killing off millions of individuals so that the body politic can be isolated and for a few decades or centuries and just like, reestablish and reevaluate itself. That's the Chinese way. That's how it's always been. I think that China is going to explode in a few decades, and they're going to shut down once again, like they always have. Crazy as that may sound. And I know it sounds crazy now, but look at Chinese history. Study it. They do this periodically. That they have this interaction with the rest of the world, and they love it, and they indulge in it. And then, like, the worst parts of themselves start to flower, like some sort of like a bad case of athlete's foot or something. It just gets worse and worse, and then they suddenly sort of like have an internal reaction. The poor rise up. There's a revolution, and the borders come down, and they just close themselves off. I mean, and it always happens. Always. It's just the way of China. Anyway.
And frankly, my attitude on that is the sooner the better, because an expansionist China benefits very few except the Chinese. In fact, I think some folks have noted the similarities between some of the recent, expansion in American deaths as a result of, drug overdoses, many of which linked to the drugs that China sells to the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or at least I don't know if it's drugs or whatnot. They do sell whatever the recent rash of deaths have been related to some overdose of something. A lot of those materials in part come from China.
Okay,
and one wonders if it's a kind of reverse opium war.
I wouldn't know, but anyway, moving on.
I don't put past the Chinese to do anything, but frankly, the sooner they are bottled up, the better. And
well, I don't think
my folks have been.
I don't think it's going to happen for at least another 30, 40 years, but I think it will happen. Look, when something happens that many times in the past, in a cyclical manner, you tend to think that, I mean, Vico's notion of, cyclical history, I've always been iffy about that. But here, in the case of China, that is the case, But anyway, we'll see soon enough. Now, the next issue becomes on the list here is, Hillary Clinton recognizes that the immigrant situation is a problem for Europe. What the fuck?
Yeah, well, she's not the only one, too. John Kerry recently said pretty much the same thing. Now, two big things to note here. I'll do the easier one. One, her short-term memory is exquisite yet again, because a lot of the reasons precipitating the migrant crisis, namely, fucking around via intervention in Libya, and other places in the Middle East. She, as Secretary of State in the United States during the first administration of the Obama presidency, had, shall we say, more than a little role in precipitating that. So you have two Secretary of States basically saying, oh, fucking shit, this mess that we made, you guys got to watch out. That's a fucking mess. So, that's certainly humorous. But here's the reality that I'm worried about, which is to say the centrist leadership, the bureaucratic elite of the current world order recognize that this is a problem for them election-wise. So they're trying to steal the key sloganeering of the dissident right and saying like, oh, we recognize that there's a crisis. We have to control it. Now, what will ultimately happen of this is they won't do a fucking thing to fix it because they don't fix anything. But they'll steal the rhetoric enough to the point where the average Joe will say, oh, I believe it's right. They're talking what I want to hear. And then we'll try to take wind from the sails of the populace. In their speeches, when they talk about this, they more or less make that connection. They said, this immigrant crisis has given rise to these populist tendencies that we don't like, so we have to control this migrant crisis in order to prevent that. I mean, they say very clearly what they intend, and they simply presume that once they steal the rhetoric and they do token things, that the shift towards nationalism will somehow stop.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to be concerned about. It's not that the centrists believe that immigration is bad. They just recognize that it's the cause of the nationalist uprising. So you have to make the gesture towards solving the immigrant problem and talking about it, but not actually doing anything about it. It's the immigrants' way. It's the immigrants' way, rather the centrist way. It's the globalist shills way of like saying, "Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's awful. Oh, that's blah 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 blah," and talking about it, but never actually doing anything to solve it, as if the words will solve the problem. Bullshit,
It's the ultimate bureaucratic response. Like, we recognize that there's a problem, but we will work vigorously to try and resolve it. In other words, just give us more chance to manage
Yeah,
through it.
exactly.
Not fix it. No, fix. Oh, well,
No,
let's
no,
not talk
come on. What the
drastic
fuck are
terms.
you
Let's
talking about?
manage. Let's
Fixing it.
manage.
We
It's
manage the
managing
decay.
it.
We're managing the decay. Yes, we're going to manage the decay. Turn the decay back, try to fix things, try to make a healthy and vibrant society. What do you think we are? Magicians? Gods? Well, we think we are, but we're not that kind of god, they're fucking, I despise them. But anyway, the Clinton is doing this. The thing is, I don't. The word came out this week, by the way, that that Trump wanted to prosecute Comey and Hillary, and the Clinton Foundation in general. Because it is a vehicle for bribery. We all know that. I mean, come on, who are we kidding here, right? It was organized bribery, the Clinton Foundation, right? The Clinton Global Initiative, all that shit, right? Why the fuck did all these people give so much money to that thing? All these foreign governments, if not for access, it was pay to play. Come on, what the fuck are you talking about, right? And Trump didn't do it. Trump didn't do it. He said that he would be impeached, or word is that he was told that he'd be impeached, blah, blah. He should have done it. It was the right thing to do. These people are awful. And now Comey is saying that he's not going to abide by any subpoena if he's subpoenaed to testify in private in front of whatever committee subpoenas him, right? A congressional committee, I assume a Senate committee, right? Because I don't think the Democrats are going to be subpoenaing him anytime soon. So if the thing is, Comey, he can say that all good and fine, defiant, blah, blah. Yeah, that doesn't mean shit because he hasn't gotten a subpoena yet. But if he does get a subpoena, let's just say, and he does say, I'm not going to testify if it's going to be in a closed door hearing, he has to be prosecuted. Are we going to have a president that and an executive that only prosecutes, if it's politically convenient? I mean, come on, what the fuck, Yeah, of course it would be ugly to prosecute Comey, but tough titties, said the kitty. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the couple of things here. One, the fact that the Clinton Foundation donations have dropped 90% should tell you everything you need to know about or why people were donating there. But more importantly, the fact that Trump did not go after them, even though apparently he wanted to, testifies to what I've been worried about for a long time now. Namely, there are too many establishment Republicans in close proximity to his ear.
Yeah.
Too many accommodations were made with the Bush presidency because one of the things we have to, well, not Bush presidency, excuse me, but the Bush type of Republican.
Yeah.
One of the things we have to continue to remind ourselves is that this is a war on two fronts with an opposition party on three fronts: opposition party, the media, and the traditional members of the Republican Party who continue to desire to be the official losers and the respectable losers. Do not forget this. I mean, this is a key issue, and they are still ensconced in the president's executive office, and they should not be there. And I understand when he started out that it made sense to try to say, let's come together as a party and work through this. But it's clear that their actions continue to undermine the president and lead him away from the policies that will strengthen his position with the public.
Yeah. I think that because I don't quite understand these GOPers who they don't want to win. It's like philosophically they're conservative and they talk the talk, but they don't want to win. They're like too gentlemanly to win. What the fuck is the matter with them? I do not understand that. I mean, how can I put it? Even the moderate Democrats, they want to win. They make the effort. I understand when you're moderate, when you're thinking to yourself the long term that, yeah, sure, we can burn our bridges today, but we might need to cross that bridge later on, so let's not burn it. Okay. Yes, I understand that mentality. But even the moderate Democrats, even conservative Democrats, they want to win. They want to win on their policies. But it's like the moderate Republicans, the centrist Republicans, they're too much of a pussy to go out and win. I don't get it. I just do not get it.
Well, part of it, I think, is a residue of their psychological mindset, which is if you have something of a conservative mindset, I mean, small c conservative, and you make a fetish over, manifesting the last vestiges of the last decencies and the last codes of conduct. Do you think that's some value to espouse those ideas while the ship is literally sinking around you? It's like making sure that the chairs are properly organized on the deck of the Titanic as it's going down, kind of thing. I think, unfortunately, that's too much of a tendency in the conservative mindset, and one simply has to remind them that while you are worried about appearing as this great well put together conservative with good morals, you haven't conserved anything. And my response is, you are acting selfishly. You are acting egotistically because you want to think, how am I going to look to other people in the years past? What will history judge us? And you think, oh, that's a great moral thing to worry about, the status of history. But the reality is that is so egocentric because you're thinking, how will you be reflected in history? You're not thinking, how will the country be reflected, or what have I, what has been preserved,
of the nation,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
What will be, the future generations? No, it's your own goddamn ego, and fuck your goddamn ego. That is thoroughly unconservative. It is thoroughly ahistoric.
Yeah.
What the whole fucking teachings of Western Christian civilization has been to try to keep you from engaging in your egocentrism. And it's not even just the Christians, even the fucking pagans, the old Greeks and Romans knew that this was the issue that you had to fight.
Yeah.
But no.
It's the basis of Stoicism, for crying out loud. Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so I just don't get it. They're just born to lose. That's what it seems to me. Born to lose, lose with like a pained smile while having a nice haircut and dressed in a nice suit. That pained smile. That it reminds me of Jeb. Jeb ! Mm-hmm. Jeb, the pathetic loser, the pathetic fat fuck who cucked out and married some floozy from Mexico, wherever the fuck she was from. No, I just find it repulsive. I fundamentally, as a man, I am repelled by the cuckoldry of these faggots who just don't stand up and win, for crying out loud. Jesus.
Well, to me, the best summary of that mindset is, remember, I think it was the Emmy Awards that came either right before or right after the 2016 election. And it's in the opening montage, and Jimmy Kimmel is trying to get to the Emmys, and he gets into a car, a limo, and the driver is Jeb. Literally, it was Jeb Bush. And he's dressed as a fucking chauffeur and everything. And he's driving this, this liberal shithead around to like the fucking award show. And Jeb was like, Jeb ! As he screams. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you are.
God,
you are a driver.
Faggot.
You are a chauffeur to people who tell you where to go. You have no agency. Now shut the fuck up and take me to Wendy's.
No, I mean, just, okay. So next topic on the agenda. Clinton. Oh yeah, Tucker and Shapiro. Well,
this is actually a good.
This
is a good connection. So it's worth your time. But the key segment, because it's clear that Tucker and Shapiro represent
give a background. Give a background to the listener.
So Shapiro has his own show. I forgot what the channel is, but yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it is the Daily Wire. It's one of those where it's a video of everything, where it's Shapiro talking to Tucker, and Shapiro's trying to act as like, oh, I have this reputation of being a great debater. But essentially, it was like a long interview. They know they talked about a number of things, and they probably agreed on a number of items. But the key premise here was when it really got to a discussion of the economy and what attitudes should or should not be had with regard to the so-called free market economy. And one of the big discussions that came up was the whole notion of technology. And Shapiro said to to Tucker, it's like, would you with like the advancements in driverless cars, would you like deny this technology should be allowed in our country? And Tucker said, are you kidding? Within a heartbeat, I wouldn't worry about it. And I'll tell you why. And he says, because I know that the single largest employer of high school educated males is truck driver. And, I don't know what the size of the population is, but let's say 10 million at least. If you suddenly say overnight, your jobs are gone, he says the destruction of those 10 million families will be so catastrophic and the ripple effect so strong that nothing you would argue about the economic benefits would justify the destructive costs that would have. He said, I would not even worry about it. I would, without hesitation, do that. And then Shapiro says, like, well, how far do you push that? Like, what about the Luddites and everything? And then Tucker's response was great. It was essentially, look, Luddites is just the simple cudgel that everybody loves to use against anybody who questions technology. They say, oh, you're literally people who break the machines. But Tucker says, no, they had a legitimate point. If you assume in a society that was for thousands of years based on an agrarian structure of the society, and then literally overnight said, okay, all that's gone, you bear a cost to that. And it's sometimes catastrophic. And he says, and for the people who didn't manage it well, AKA some of the Central and Eastern European countries, you get catastrophic revolutions that create even worse situations.
Yeah.
So you actually are of a concern here. And Tucker's, was great. He says there's this, this free market attitude, which he fundamentally doesn't understand, which is to say, you can't stop technology here. You just got to let it go on. He says, who's in charge here?
Yeah.
We are humans with agency. We have free will. Are we going to be in control of this situation or not? And
Yeah.
I mean, and Tucker basically said, look, there's no Nicene creed of free market economics that we all had to, accept here.
Yeah.
And it clears that Shapiro has no response to this. For all of his credos given to Shapiro for being a great debater,
No, he's not.
he is a regurgitator of the key tactics. And if he is a great debater, that says more about the weakness of left-wingers than it does about the strength of Shapiro.
Yeah.
Because,
exactly.
with Tucker is just literally the way he articulated it. It's the oldest notion of conservatism. This is like how the Tories were, the old Tories were against the Whigs and the liberals in the 19th century or the 18th century.
Well, so is Tucker Carlson just red-pilled as fuck?
Pretty much. I mean, he wouldn't. I don't think he's like a pure race realist by any means, but I mean, in terms of the key issues of, the free market economy does more harm than good. There is a right to nationhood and to control your borders and whatnot. All of that stuff is, the old-fashioned, conservatism that has made a comeback. I mean, the small c conservatism, not conservatism Inc. That's Shapiro. That's just free market capitulation. But the old notion of there is a, and the other thing, like Shapiro made this great argument that he says, like, well, part of the thing, the founding story of America is that, hey, if you're living in an area that has bad jobs, you should do what the pioneers did and get up and move across country to find brighter pastures. And then Shapiro, this was Tucker's response when I was convinced this is the old conservatism, stronger than ever, when he said, yeah, just get up and leave the graves of your ancestors and the history that you've built up and the roots that you've built for the sake of becoming a soulless cog in a machine in a metropolis that is indifferent to you, or something to that effect. I mean, that is the ancient response in a good way. I'm not saying that as criticism of Tucker, far from it.
Yeah, no, good answer. I'm with Tucker. The notion of like moving, you only move when your situation is catastrophic where you are. The Irish who left Ireland during the potato famine, it was a fucking famine. That's why they were leaving. They were literally starving to death. Okay? That was a very good reason to leave. It wasn't like, something, I'm just kind of tired of the Irish weather. Let's try something new. No, it was a catastrophic move. Brought about by a famine that what was it? Half the population of Ireland either left or died or some shit like that. Yeah,
it was catastrophic. Yeah.
And so this notion that Conservatism Inc. pushes. Look, Conservatism Inc., like Ben Shapiro and people like that, from my point of view, what they are basically, they are shills of the oligarchs. They are people who are trying to create a populist sentiment for policies that only benefit the oligarchy. They are the shills of them. And they are not people who really give a shit about the people. They dress up what they're saying as if it's good for the people. As if, capitalism and opportunities for all. That sounds all very well and good, sure. But it's a kind of propaganda. It is propaganda. It is propaganda, and don't ever forget it. And what I'm liking about Tucker Carlson is that he sort of used to be a propagandist. Let's back when he was in bow tie days, he was a propagandist. He was a part of Conservatism Inc., though I suspect that he didn't realize it at the time. I
No.
suspect that he was just genuine about his conservatism. And then, you keep pointing to the fact that he changed ties from bow tie to a straight tie. And that was the transformation moment, the transformative moment when he sort of like woke up. I tend to agree. Okay, I don't know if it was actually the change of tie style, but
Well, I mean, obviously, it's not like as soon as I put on the normal tie,
Yeah.
suddenly I'm this. No, it's an outward
No, I
manifestation
know.
of an inward transformation.
I'm teasing. But I do agree with you that straight tie Tucker is truly conservative as opposed to conservative ink. I think that he didn't realize he was conservative ink before. I thought that
He actually addressed it in the interview. By the way, he
Really?
said, because when they were talking or arguing about this, he said, "Look," because he talked about how he says oftentimes people in the media just are boosterism for this type of free market economic, all responsibilities for what we're doing be damned. He says, I know that was the industry we're in, and he says, if I in the past acted in a boosterist fashion to that, again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry for that, but he basically says this: if I acted in that way as a propagandist or a booster for that, I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
I did not intend to do that. I think he realizes it now who he was.
Yeah.
And I think he is, perhaps there's some degrees of making amends. Like, look,
Well, the very fact
there's always we
all
act
forgiven
in
and forgotten.
archetype. There are archetypal shifts in people over the history. There, we follow patterns. The Tucker pattern, in its own kind of unique way, is a replica in some degree of the St. Augustine archetype, which is to say, look, when I was younger, I had these attitudes. I decided to do whatever the fuck I wanted to do, and everything else be damned. And you eventually get to the point where you realize a certain emptiness in that. Now, obviously, it's not, I don't presume that Tucker was going around whoring around and saying, free market capitalism, but he certainly was whoring around in terms of the just generally like following party line.
Yeah.
And I think he, by virtue of just being out amongst the populace and just seeing the reality of what he was peddling, realized that there was more to this than he probably gave credence to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, the guy is upper class. He was ensconced in an upper class milieu, hanging out with other types such as himself, news types, and he was known by other liberal news people to be one of the funniest guys around, and very popular. Very popular, even though he was a conservative, as a lot of these people would say. He was liked. He was part of the gang.
Right.
Just conservative. And I think that his conservatism, it's not that it was skin deep, it was sort of like casually believed in or espoused. I don't think it was as serious. And I think that as he just grew up and grew into a man, he just realized, holy shit, And I think that also a lot of his early popularity and his early success was that he was the well-spoken conservative that could be wheeled around in on TV, right? But now I think that he's sort of like a real conservative, and I think also I have no insight to this, but I would bet that a lot of the people whom he used to think of as friends, who he thought were friends, no longer speak to him because of his conservatism, because of his real conservatism, and he's realizing, I suspect, I could be totally wrong, that a lot of the quote-unquote friendships he had before he must realize that they thought of him as their pet conservative. And now that he's a real conservative, they don't want anything to do with him. And that must really have been an eye-opening thing to him. You see what I'm saying? I mean, just as much as seeing the reality of working class people and how political beliefs and political policies change people's lives and how liberal policies hurt people in many ways. And I think that kind of personal change in his own situation must have had a real impact. I'm totally speculating, but I suspect something like that happened.
Well, here's why the speculation is warranted, because I'll take a couple stabs at it. One, I recognize that tendency in certain quote-unquote friendships, which is I'll like you to the point of which you approve the list. Though it's not true friendship, that is like a quid pro quo. It's like, I like you because of what you could do for me, or you entertain me, or you do something that I get immediately out of it. A true friendship is I don't get an immediate material gain. I just value the friendship in and of its own sake.
Yeah.
And you would know it's like, someone, let's be honest about that. A friend of mine in that condition, outside of even extreme moral failings, the friendship will probably still remain.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's how strong those friendships are. There are very few of them, by the way, that you have in your life. And trust me, the fewer you have, the better they are.
Yeah.
So there'll be that. And he's recognizing probably, because I don't doubt what you're saying has, grounds of validity, that there's elements of people who did that. The other thing that he's probably experiencing, and I think I've heard him say something to the effect in an oblique way, is that he probably has a number of friends, probably high profile people who agree with him or who sympathize with him, but have only said so to him privately.
Yeah.
And I suspect, that's a bittersweet thing. One is like, okay, I know there are people who still, despite everything that's being said against me, are sympathetic to me. But at the same time, it's like, he's the one holding his neck out on the line every goddamn day. Why aren't the other folks
doing
courageous enough to maintain solidarity?
Yeah.
Because this is the core issue you're going to have when you're living in such an oppressive way of life. It's very easy, and perhaps, in many instances smarter, perhaps, to make do, to have your private criticisms, but to keep them private, never expose yourself, never take that risk, and to vicariously hope that someone who's going publicly is someone that you could say, he's doing the work for me. I'll tell him that he's doing the work, but, never take it beyond that. It takes an extreme amount of courage if, like, a number of, notable people where they're saying, you know what, Tucker's fundamentally right, they should say so. Ideal world, they should say so, but they probably fear the risks that could come from that. I mean, let's face it, Tucker's own house was subject to violence as far as I'm concerned. This is the kind of moral conundrum you're in, and I feel like that has to also be bittersweet on it.
Yeah, I think that also that attack on his house, we're going to have to see the effects of that, because I think it must have really opened his eyes because of the response of so many people on the left, of just like la-di-da, and some assholes, I think it was Matt Iglesias, basically saying that it was a good thing. What the fuck is wrong with?
Well, he said, tactically, I can understand that it's probably not a good thing, but I have hard time having sympathy for Tucker's wife.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Exactly.
I mean, if anything, you would have sympathy for a housewife, a mother of small children, being, accosted by a gang of potential crazies. Come on. I mean, no matter your political persuasion, just as a human being, you'd find sympathy for such a poor woman, right? And him to say that he didn't have sympathy for her, Jesus fucking Christ, that is just fucking inhumane as far as I'm concerned. But, well, that's the state of the fucking left. Okay, let's move on to the next one. You mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. Who the fuck is Tulsi Gabbard?
So I'm surprised you actually don't know who this is. So, because she is, I forget from where, maybe Hawaii, congresswoman from Hawaii, or maybe somewhere else. I forget exactly.
Democrat.
But she's an interesting Democrat, which is, she had historically not been a critic of the president in a way that anybody would have expected. In fact, she's sympathetic to the president's attitude that, look, our foreign policy interventionism is bullshit. Mm-hmm. We get our asses into a lot of conflicts that we don't need to be. A sort of inward-focused, semi-America first type attitude is much preferable. And so she has been, sympathetic to the president when he said, don't fuck around in Syria. There's no business for doing that. A lot of it is bullshit. Obama was full of shit in what he did. What the Clintons wanted to do in Libya was garbage. She's at least an independent-minded Democrat. Anyway, this is tied to the Saudi Arabia business. So, as we are all becoming aware of, it's pretty, I won't say it's pretty clear. What I will say, official reports make it, are consistently saying, look, what's his name? MB, what is the current leader of Saudi Arabia? Not the official one, but the prince. What's his name?
Oh, Mohammed bin Salman. Yes.
Mohammed bin Salman probably directly ordered the assassination of Khashoggi, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think the president's response was, oh, whatever. And Gabbard's response to that is like, there's nothing, making America great or putting America first in being, Saudi Arabia's bitch. Namely, just letting Saudi Arabia do whatever the fuck it wants, or dictating to us, what we should or should not be doing. And I think we can talk about the Saudi Arabia business a little bit more. But what was interesting to me were the attacks on Tulsi Gabbard. They always took the same form, and they often came from conservatives, unfortunately, and a number of whom I ordinarily would have respected, which is to say, oh well, aren't you just an apologist for
Assad?
Assad?
Yeah,
and it's like that's the childish, stupid, idiotic conservatism Inc. Israeli foreign policy, not U.S. foreign policy attitude.
Yeah,
that our lot seems to cater to far more than it should.
Yeah.
I think her point was valid that no, we should be independent from Saudi Arabia. It's a unfortunate mess that we're tied at the hip with these assholes. The preference is to tell them to go fuck themselves and whatnot. So that's kind of like, it was interesting to me that's come up again. And I bring it up simply because it's a good way to kind of segue into the Saudi Arabian business. If there was more stuff that you wanted to add on that front.
Well, I think that insofar as Tulsi Gabbard, I have no insight about her. By the way, she is the 2nd congressional district of Hawaii, and she's like she seems pretty locked down in that seat. But anyway, her, I have no insight about Saudi Arabia. I have some insight. Now, the Saudi Arabia situation, MBS, that is Mohammed bin Salman, his situation is very precarious at this time. For those of you who don't know, basically, Mohammed bin Salman is the favorite son, not the eldest son, but the favorite son of the king of Saudi Arabia. Now, why does this matter? Because in Saudi Arabia, it's not necessarily, it's patrilineal, but it's not strictly patrilineal. That isn't the eldest son inherits, okay? It can become a brother, or it can even become potentially a cousin, okay? Of course, a man. Now, Mohammed bin Salman is the crown prince. He's, I believe, 37 years old, I believe. Now, he has been making some moves in Saudi Arabia to, quote-unquote, modernize it. One of the moves that he's been making is that eventually the idea of privatizing Aramco, like floating it out there and making it a publicly traded company. He's also been prosecuting the war in Yemen, which is, just created all kinds of havoc for the people of Yemen. Just horrible shit going on in Yemen, and nobody's saying anything because it's Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's position in the U.S. economy is crucial, and people don't realize it. They don't understand the importance of Saudi Arabia. And it's something that is very subtle, but once you understand it, it becomes very, very clear. And I'll just give a quick precis of it. You see, Saudi Arabia is the number one exporter of oil in the world, the largest with proven oil reserves. And they, since 1974, have priced their oil in dollars. And they also buy U.S. Treasury bonds with their dollar exceedant. That is, see, the oil that they produce, they will only sell it in dollars. They do sell a few, some of the oil, a minority of the oil, in other currencies, but that's very specific conditions and situations. In general, in the open market, they sell it in dollars. Now, why does this matter? It forces every other country in the world to get dollars in order to buy Saudi oil. And the rest of the world wants Saudi oil, okay? And also, Saudi Arabia, because of its position in OPEC as a dominant member, because of its virtue of its oil production, which is the largest of the OPEC members, it can, it can effectively force the other OPEC members to price their oil in dollars, which it has done. Now, when oil, a key commodity, is priced in dollars, that forces other countries to get those dollars, right? So since other countries, like Japan and European Union and Britain and whomever else, they have to get dollars to buy oil. So that props up the U.S. dollar. And it's essential. That's part of the move. It creates a demand for U.S. dollars. So Brits have to go out and buy dollars with the pounds that they have in order to buy oil. They can't take their pound sterling and go to Riyadh or wherever and just plop them down and buy oil from Saudi Arabia. They need dollars. Same with Japan. Japanese yen, no good for buying oil from Saudi Arabia. So this is how you create a demand for US dollars. And on the other hand, Saudi Arabia, with the dollars that it receives, it takes the excedent, that is the stuff that's left over, okay, and plops it into U.S. Treasury bonds. Now, why does this matter? Because, see, the United States has run a federal government deficit since the 70s, right? And since the 60s, really, if you look at it, all the way back to the Vietnam War. And so the United States needs to finance this. So it puts out Treasury bonds. Treasury bonds are IOUs. Now, by putting out these IOUs, the Treasury bonds, somebody has to buy this stuff. If you have too much of a supply of something and not enough demand, what happens? The price of that supply collapses, right? But see, if you have a steady purchaser in the shape of Saudi Arabia, then the price of that good or asset remains propped up, which is what's happened with U.S. Treasury bonds. That's why the United States has been able to have these gargantuan budget deficits year after year after year. The United States, were it any other country in the world, would be bankrupt. There would already have been a financial crisis because the United States at this time, I do believe that the Treasury bond, outstanding Treasury bonds are something of the order of 110% of U.S. GDP. If this were any other country in the world, the United States would be bankrupt. The only reason it's not bankrupt is because of Saudi Arabia propping up the price of Treasury bonds by its constant purchase of Treasury bonds. You see the situation here. Okay, so Saudi Arabia is key to America's economic survival. That's why Saudi Arabia is so important. In an economic sense, Saudi Arabia is the 51st state of the Union because everything that it produces, it sells in dollars, and it takes those dollars and buys Treasury bonds. It's just, the 51st state, economically speaking. It's why the United States is not a bankrupt nation, as it should be, okay?
Long story short, we are unfortunately tied to the hip at this situation. The ideal situation we would prefer not to be, and we shouldn't have to be. But this is kind of them's is the breaks.
Yeah.
But this is frankly the elephant in the room, and related to part of the many reasons why we can't have nice things like a country that has a foreign policy primarily focused on its own protection and reasonable self-interest.
Well, no, I would disagree. This is the self-interest of the United States. The United States, as a country, has made this compact with Saudi Arabia. We'll supply you with the weapons. We'll turn a blind eye to all the craziness that you do in your country. We'll even turn a blind eye to the fact that it was your people who blew up, who brought down the Twin Towers and tried to destroy the Pentagon and potentially the Capitol building as well. We'll turn a blind eye to all of that, so long as you play the game of selling oil for dollars, not even selling us the oil, but just selling it for and the other issue is of course buying Treasury bonds.
Well, hold on a second. That is not true self-interest. That's economic interest. And unfortunately, people in our country have confused economic interest as the sole or only interest.
Yeah.
We have allowed economic interest to be our only interest at the cost of moral interest, international, just general, broader social interest as whatnot, which is to say, you fund our economic system and we will not only turn a blind eye to your shit, but we will allow ourselves to get involved into things that ensure that you are in a good state.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
We won't pick sides that offend you.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So they do have a significant trump card on a lot of foreign policy issues.
Yeah, and here's the other issue. The other thing that Mohammed bin Salman is doing. Now, Mohammed bin Salman is a crazy man. Okay, I mean, no question. The guy is fucking nuts. Okay, he's nuts because he's an expansionist. He's a true believer. He's a crazy man, and also he is a spoiled young man sitting on top of enormous power that he didn't earn. That's a recipe for disaster. When you have such a situation, that's just, it always ends badly, okay? And this guy is not going to have a Henry V moment of waking up and growing into his power. No, no, no. This guy is crazy. Now, back in November of 2017, this guy, what he did was basically he locked up in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh all of the basically the entire oligarchy of Saudi Arabia, and it was a shakedown. And he got basically $800 billion out of these guys. It was a shakedown. He had a lot of these people fucking tortured, and it is known that they were tortured. They were tortured by American contractors, military contractors, Blackwell type, Blackwell, yeah, those guys, right? Or whatever the name, the Prince guy, the brother of DeVos, right? Anyway, here's the thing about MBS. He has created a lot of resentment inside Saudi Arabia for that stunt and a lot of other shit, right? And a lot of people hate his guts. The younger brother of the current king is making noises that he could potentially replace MBS. So his situation is very precarious. And so what MBS has done, which is pretty clever, he has made sure that Saudi oil is at record low prices. It's being manipulated lower so that the United States is friendly to Saudi Arabia. He does not want to alienate the United States at any cost because he's in trouble. He's in real trouble. So Trump's milquetoast speech about MBS was a gigantic win for MBS. I think that the United States is going to rue the day that they kept MBS on board. I mean, this guy is fucking nuts, okay? I mean, he's crazy, okay? He's not like the Shah of Iran. Shah of Iran was a narcissist and a megalomaniac and all the rest of it, but he wasn't really an expansionist. He liked collecting military toys, but not really doing anything with them, okay? The Shah, there was a famous novel back in the 70s called The Crash of 79 that assumed that the Shah of Iran was actually expansionist and militarily adventurous. He wasn't. He was never a military adventurer, but MBS is. And MBS likes what we call gay ops. He likes to do gay ops and crazy shit, like this Khashoggi murder. It was pointless. I mean, Khashoggi, who gives a shit? The guy alive was a shitloads less trouble than the guy dead. He just got into his head, MBS got into his head that he wanted to kill Khashoggi, and he did, in an incredibly stupid way. Stupid and sloppy and, okay, well, spilt milk, water under the bridge, right? But the thing is, see, it sort of like shows to what kind of a man MBS is. And MBS is a dangerous guy who is going to do more gay ops. He's going to get into military adventures. Eventually, it's going to bite America in the ass. I think Trump should have gone out in that speech and said, the CIA has confirmed that MBS ordered the assassination of Khashoggi. We think that MBS is a bad influence for the region and bad for Saudi Arabia. And we urge Saudi Arabia to reconsider its relationship with MBS. He gives that speech, MBS is dead by sundown. But he didn't, okay? I mean, really, this speech was key for the survival of MBS, okay? If Trump had withdrawn his support for MBS, everybody knows the political reality that Trump removing his support for MBS does not mean that the United States is turning its back on Saudi Arabia, because the United States cannot turn its back on Saudi Arabia for the reasons I explained. He would have been removed, and his uncle would have be put into power. Now, MBS now has a big chip because he can say that Trump supports him. Not full-throatedly, perhaps, not as much as he would like, but he supports it enough not to want his removal, okay, which is good enough for MBS. And so it's going to be a lot harder for the opposition in Saudi Arabia to get rid of MBS. And a lot of people hate him. Enough people that MBS would be wise to cull a lot of these Saudi princes and whatnot, right? Now, if that happens, the people who are going to the people he culls are going to be his opponents. So the people who are on his side, who are crazies like him, are going to grow their influence and power. And what does that mean? That means that they're going to start doing crazy shit, crazy shit. Okay, I think that MBS is a very, very dangerous individual. And to allow him to exist where he is now is a dangerous move and a bad move on the part of Trump. And I think that retrospectively, this will prove to have been one of the worst Trump decisions, because MBS will cause problems in the future, big ones. I have no idea which kinds of problems, but he's that kind of a guy. He's one of those guys who's like sort of like pathetic. Because he's never earned anything on his own. He only got his position because he's his father's favorite. Okay, but he's not smart. He's not capable, right? But he's crazy. And such people who recognize that they don't really deserve to be where they are, they always try to do something to sort of like earn their position, even if it's in their own minds, right? He's going to do something and it's going to be catastrophic. It's going to blow up in everybody's face. And the rest of us are going to be left picking up the pieces from the disaster that this asshole gets involved with. You know what I'm saying? Sorry for the rant.
As I said,
sorry for the rant.
Well, it's okay. It was only 20 minutes. It goes back to the whole question. We don't, being Saudi Arabia's bitch is not a great thing.
No.
And more importantly, you don't want to be MBS's bitch, because God knows where he's going to stick it. God knows where he's going to stick it. So there you go. The wonderful foreign policy. And I honestly believe that part of that response is the fact that the president's distracted with one too many things. Well, only one too many things, probably way too many things at this point in time. But, we'll see.
Yeah.
The other little detail of this week, Michael Avenatti just cannot seem to catch too much of a break. People who know of last week, Avenatti was arrested for some sort of domestic abuse. Now, the LA district attorney decided that they wouldn't prosecute him, probably because they didn't feel they had enough on it. But I'm seeing more accusations being leveled against Avenatti, and now like somebody, I don't know who her name was, but she now has pictures that, the guy, abused me or whatnot. But at this point, regardless of the legality or illegality of his actions, whether these accusations are true or not, the man's done. He is no longer the bright light of the Democrats.
Was he ever? Was he ever?
Well, let's be honest. People certainly acted as if he was.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, here's a fighter. Steve Bannon was actually pretty concerned about Avenatti being a fighter to watch out over. This has passed, as it were, in part because Avenatti got Avenatti'd. Accusations leveled against him were enough to torpedo his career. And I'm sure deep in the corridors of the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh is having a slight chuckle, if you will, over this turn of events. I certainly would. I am perhaps not. He's a good Catholic boy, but I'm a far worse Catholic and a petty man, and I certainly would. I certainly would be laughing over this.
No, I think that Avenatti, he's just look, he was a flash in the pan. He'll be gone soon enough. I don't give him any kind of I don't take him seriously under any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he even got evicted from his law firm because of non-payment of the rent. What the fuck? He's just a loser, He's just a loser who happened to grandstand at the right moment, and now he's going to fade back into the obscurity that he richly deserves. The other thing that was funny was that this Chipotle, however the fuck you pronounce it.
Chipotle.
Yeah. The PR nightmare. You give the presses on that one. That's pretty funny.
So yeah, very, very quick situation there. I don't even know how long ago it was, but basically there was footage on Twitter, because of course it would be.
Because of course.
Of a manager of a Chipotle's basically telling a bunch of black kids, like, get the fuck out of the restaurant. You never have any money. You have to, if you're going to be here, you have to buy shit. And they said, we don't have any money. It was a racist.
No, she said that they had to pay before. They had to pay beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah. And naturally, through the public relations bullshit, Chipotle's like, we're going to have to fire this woman. Turns out, based on little effort to investigate the online social media profile of these accusers, is that not only was this woman warranted in saying what she was, that basically, I don't trust you guys. They had documented evidence saying that they dined and dashed, if not at that that specific Chipotle, elsewhere.
Yeah.
And people were saying, no, she was actually, reasonable. There was history of these people being, no
they
good
were
on
just
this
a bunch
run.
of punks.
She did exactly what a manager should have done. And here's the kicker. It became apparent, and it's been published, the communications, that Chipotle was aware of those tweets, basically admitting to, dining and dashing, and decided to fire her anyway.
Yeah.
And when people finally brought us to the Chipotle's attention, big shitstorm, and they've now reached back out to the manager and they want to rehire her. Fortunately, people around her are saying, don't do that so fast. First off, you probably have something, if not a defamation suit, basically a wrongful firing suit on your hands.
Definitely.
And you should be compensated for the bullshit that they put you through.
Yep.
Because I guarantee you, if they hire you back, they will make you sign legal documents that prevent you from ever suing them or ever talking about this ever again.
Well, see, I would be on Chipotle's side if they had no inkling that these guys were into dining and dashing, right? And I look, as a little punk myself, I dined and dashed a few times when I was like in my late teens. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, but little shits like that, sure. And I don't have a problem with a manager demanding payment up front. It's reasonable. Okay. It's a reasonable request because you're essentially going on credit, and a restaurant manager, you as a client, as a patron of a restaurant, you're going there and eating on credit, and a restaurant manager has the right to basically not extend that credit to you, and not allow you to pay at the end of your meal, because she could look at you and just say, just on just previous knowledge of you personally, as appears to be the case in this situation, that you're going to dine and dash. So at least you can say, no, pay first and then I'll feed you whatever you want. And it's reasonable. Now, if Chipotle had decided to fire her without knowing about the history of these kids, I would have been like, I'm not so sure about the management, but okay, I get their point. They want to avoid the PR nightmare. But them knowing about it, fuck them. I say to the woman, the manager, sue him, and get as much as you can.
Go for it. Yeah. Go for it. This is just a manifestation of what we all have been suspecting, that there is no rule of law per se. This is just a rule of
mob.
Public relations management, and it's mob mentality. And here's the thing, that this was to me the icing on the cake, is after Chipotle fired this manager, they tweeted to the abused people, basically saying, what happened here is not how our employees should treat our customers. We are committed to treating all of our guests fairly and with respect. The manager has been terminated and the restaurant has been retrained, so this doesn't happen again. We'll be back in touch soon. Here's the kicker. After Chipotle fired the manager, the victim, his name is Ali, of course, wasn't satisfied. Quote, you terminated her, but not her sidekicks? Interesting. Just because you, quote, retain someone doesn't make them less racist. And I hope y'all know that. In other words, he wanted more blood, because that's how it always works, isn't it?
More.
It's never
enough.
I mean, and frankly, Chipotle deserves everything they get as a result of this. This is a complete capitulation to the mob rule. And I'm not even saying this as someone who thinks their food tastes like shit, which I do, but that's beside the point. This is just don't go to it. It's not worth it.
Okay.
It's one of those, Chipotle is, what I will say about it is this. Chipotle is that worst manifestation of contemporary culture, which is, it is essentially crap fast food, but it paints itself in the aura of liberal do-goodery. It's like, we're a conscientious company, like the Starbucks of the world. You know what I mean? It's like, we're focused on the farmers who grow our fucking cilantro, and they're so wonderful people. And you're eating fast food. It's like, God knows how many thousands of calories in that shit that you put in your mouth.
Yeah.
And yet they have this gloss of, if we just play our cards right, people will think that we're good people.
Yeah. When
in reality, there's a much more honest relationship with the likes of like an old McDonald's, which is, we're a fucking company looking at making money. That's the relationship. That's honest. It's that, look, I can hate you as a company for doing this, that, or the other. You have your interest, I have mine. Fair enough. But this whole, gloss of these contemporary companies are like, oh, we believe in all of these virtues. And it's a fucking, 3-card Monty game. right? We're still going to take your fucking money, but there's a chance you could fucking win the liberal, good feeling good, card game here. And it's a bunch of bullshit. I hate it so much.
Yeah. But it's funny. It's look.
Oh, it is funny. Yeah.
Look. I've slowly changed my mind about this whole virtue signaling shit. I mean, I still despise it, right? But I understand where it's coming from. The loss of religion is why we have this shit. We lost religion, and we as people, as human beings, we need to show one another that we're moral and decent. We have this need. I personally don't have this need. I personally do not feel that I have to show to my fellow human beings that I'm a good person. I just assume that I am. I act as such. And so, fuck it. And when I have to be an asshole, I'm an asshole. Fine, sue me, okay, if you can. But the thing is, see, I think it's an inherent need of a sizable portion of the populace. And once you remove religion, which is the organized expression of morality, right? What's a virtue signaler going to do? Well, they got a virtue signal somehow, so they start doing it with these stupid antics, right? And so I think it's just a natural part of human beings, and you just have to manage it. And you have to just sort of like ignore it and blow it off. I mean, getting outraged over it every week is sort of like, it's just a waste of fucking time, because we're always going to have these virtue signalers, but it's worthwhile to realize where it's coming from. The loss of religion is where this is coming from. And so people applying their personal morality to things which properly shouldn't be in the realm of morality. I mean, but you get this shit. But oh well, I mean, it's. I don't think that we're going to be able to eliminate this virtue signaling. I think that what's happening is that with religion now really and truly dead, people are going to be doing more and more of this shit. Okay, but we're always going to be seeing it. That's my thinking. I don't know if you agree or not.
Well, I think what you've described more or less manifest that there is a religious impulse in people. Well, I put it I put it as an asterisk, because virtue signaling is in some sense the opposite of at least the Christian tradition. The Christian tradition, we all assume we're guilty going in and we're trying to be better. The virtue signalers, I'm already good.
No,
and
that's
nobody else is. I recognize it.
That we're all sinners. Okay.
No, that's universal Christian. And the Catholics always get this, that we're all sinners, but even the Protestants recognize this. Yeah. The only difference between the Protestants is they think when it's of their own knowledge of the Bible and without authority that they can say that they're good. Yeah. So the virtue signaling is more similar to the Protestants in the sense that they can just, jump on their fucking desk and say, I read the Bible and, no one can tell me otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But, no, I'm not saying that there isn't an inherent religious impulse. There is. I'm saying that organized religion is dead. Okay, not the natural and inherent religious impulse that we all have. That is always going to be with us. But it's the organized religion and our good friend, our good ideology, a liberal democracy, killed it dead. So yeah. So anyway, we've gone on trying the patience of our dear listeners long enough. How long has this show been going on now? Wow, an hour and a half. So. On this cheerful note, we are going to call it a podcast. This has been the Coach and Benway podcast, the Weekly Bile episode for, November 24th, 2018. Hope you all have enjoyed the show, and we will catch you next time. Take it easy.